Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Sin and Tonic. Today's story is that of Nicole Van Den Hurk. This one can only be described as a terrifying tragedy. Let's go. Sin and Tonic! I'm harassed, not gonna lie. Nearly didn't make it to the shed because my son said, Mum, I've found a slug of some description. I've never seen one like it before. Oh my God, it's making me itch. If I get through the video, it will be a miracle because I'm in the shed and I'm terrified. I've got my feet on a block. It was not a slug. It was a freaking adder. Yeah, baby adder, but still. I have actually been bitten by a baby adder in my life. It was slightly bigger than this one, so it's an adolescent, I would say. Anyway, it wasn't a pleasant experience and I'm terrified of them. So I've run up here and now I'm sitting with my feet on a block because I'm convinced that they can get in. Anyhow, I'm going to do my best, but if I keep I'm going to be jumpy. Let's just put it that way. Frickin' jumpy. Today's story is taking us to the Netherlands. Not the Neverland, but the Netherlands. The Netherlands. Netherlands. I always say the Netherlands, but it's the Netherlands. Nicole Van Den Hurk, she was actually born in Germany on the 4th of July in 1980. Her family consisted of her mother, her stepfather, and a stepbrother. Her mother struggled with her mental health, and the relationship between her mother and her stepfather, Ad, was troubled. So they decided to move to the Netherlands for a fresh start, things like that. But you can never run from your problems. Nicole was only 3 years old when she moved to the Netherlands. I've said it too much. Netherlands. So, it's pretty much all that she knew. Sadly, the move and the fresh start did not work, and her mother just continued to really struggle with her mental health. So when Nicole was 9, her mother and her stepfather separated. Now, her stepfather, Ad, he was, I find that an unusual name to say. Excuse me if I always look a bit cringy when I say it because I find it uncomfortable to say. He ended up with custody of Nicole. It's quite unusual for the mother not to have custody, but it sounds like her mother really was not fit to look after a child. Her stepfather went on to marry a woman called Yolanda. Her stepfather was also musical. I think he was famous. I didn't go down that rabbit hole because the case I was was more fascinating, but he was musical and he married Yolanda and she was also a musical in that music industry. This meant that they were often away for long periods of time, not ideal when you have children. The stepbrother's also living with them, and that's Andy. Because of this situation, the children spent a lot of time with Ad's mother, and she lived nearby. Sadly, in 1995, Nicole's mother would take her own life. Her mental health struggles were too much, and it was said that she was upset by the fact that her ex-husband had moved on and found love again, but you don't know the reason why. Nicole would struggle with big emotions, obviously because her mum has passed away, also because she never saw her mother again after her stepfather had won custody. So I think reading between the lines, and I might be wrong, but it seemed like she was quite angry and resentful towards her stepfather, almost like he kept her away from her mother. But again, I am reading between the lines there. That might not be the case. I am so uncomfortable. Just so you know, I'm terrified. Can they go upstairs? Can they climb the stairs? They come into the big house at work sometimes, so they can get inside. I know this. Nicole moved in with her grandmother, so I do think there was some tension with her stepfather. She moved in with the grandmother and she got herself a job at a bakery nearby and seemed like she was trying to move on with her life. And then on October the 6th in 1995, she was 15 years old. She would get onto her bike as she did normally and go to her shift at the bakery. And she would never arrive. This was unlike Nicole. She was not runaway material. She was settled and she enjoyed working at the bakery and she was enjoying parts of her life at this time. Obviously, she was grieving about her mother, but in other aspects of her life, she was settled and happy living with her grandmother and having her job. She was quite quickly reported missing because it was so out of character for her not to show up. And at 7 p.m. that evening, the police actually found her bicycle. It was found on the banks of the River Domel. Now, that is just... You don't want to be finding the bike of a missing girl on the banks of a river. That's just not good. Over the next 2 weeks, that river was searched extensively. They found nothing. They appealed for witnesses. Had anybody seen her on her bike near this river? Just anything. They were desperate. Surprisingly, and this does surprise me, the investigators didn't believe that any harm had really come to her at that point. Really? I mean, my first thought when they find her bicycle on the banks of the river is terrible accident. Something's happened, she's fallen in. Why would you not think harm has come to her? Am I just terrible? Like, my brain goes there, maybe. But they believed that because her mother, or maybe they just thought she was that was a decoy, because they believed that the grief that she was experiencing because she'd lost her mother had made her run away. Her stepfather was really unhappy with that, really unhappy. And he wanted them to do more because he was insisting that she would not have run away. And then on the 19th of October, they found her rucksack. This time they found her rucksack near a freaking canal. Eindhoven Canal. Eindhoven. Might be saying that incorrectly. Sounds nice. Eindhoven. Also might be totally wrong, because sometimes when I put an unusual word, write it into my phone when I'm making notes, it just changes it to something random. So that could be completely wrong. Sneaky. And then on the 24th of October, the police get an anonymous phone call, and they're not quick enough to trace it or, whatever, but it is recorded, saying that she is dead. This person says, she's dead and I know who killed her. Dun, dun, dun. And then hangs up. What? Oh, I was going to say remind me, but you can't. Shame. I've got something to remember. See if I can. The search would continue and the police continued to get, what are they called? Sightings, leads and phone calls about Nicole. And still nothing came of them. And then sadly, on the 22nd of November, a hiker would come across Nicole's remains. This was in local woodland, and I think it was a bit of a surprise that she hadn't been found in that area. I wonder whether her body had been moved. There was no talk of that, but maybe, I don't know, they had been searching not just the rivers and the canals, but people had been really looking for Nicole. So I think they were a bit surprised that she hadn't been found already. However, she was hidden under cuttings, so she might have been quite well hidden originally. Nicole's autopsy showed that she had multiple injuries. She had 2 jaw fractures. She had injuries to her fingers and her head. Now, I'm saying her remains were found. So the fact that they could tell these things, I think those injuries must have been severe enough to have caused, on the skull and on the bones. I think that's what they were looking at. So severe enough injuries to be able to tell when looking at just her remains. For example, the only way that they knew she had been stabbed was that they found a mark on her rib. So clever what they do, so clever. So she had been stabbed and also beaten. Prime example of my phone being a pain. A reward was offered. This is what it says. A reward was offered by the Van Den Hurk. Well, that's not what they're called, is it? A reward was offered by the Van Den Hurks for anybody that had information that would lead to the capture of her killer. At this point, the police released their little recording of the anonymous caller, saying she's dead and I know who killed her. They hoped that somebody would recognise the voice. Over the course of the investigation, her stepbrother Andy and her stepdad Ad, they were both arrested, different times, but they were both arrested and both released because there was no evidence to suggest that they actually had anything to do with her disappearance and her murder. And then the case went cold. I think it was 2004. In 2004, I'm going to say, a cold case team, what a job. They came in to try and solve the case again, but to no avail. However, in March of 2011, Nicole's stepbrother Andy, he has moved to England. He's come to the UK. He writes a Facebook post where he confesses to her murder. He also takes himself down to the local police station, hands himself in, saying, I killed my stepsister. And then he is extradited to the Netherlands. Frustratingly, 5 days later, he is released. Why, you ask? He's confessed to murder. I hear you. But all is not as it seems, because Andy had given a false confession. Naughty. But there's a reason why. He was aware of the amazing advances in DNA. And it was frustrating because I believe before this, he had approached the police to say that could they exhume Nicole's body and retest for DNA because, all of these advancements. And they were like, no. So he thought if he confessed to her murder, that they would exhume her body to corroborate his story. But no, they did not. So he went a step further. And this is when a whole sort of families, He then accused his father of raping and murdering his stepsister. So he went there. He was like, okay, I know that my dad did it. Because of that, his dad, Ad, can't help it now, that's what he's known as, he then started to think, has Andy really actually got something to do with this? Like, what's going on? What's he doing? What's he playing at? He's throwing me under the bus. Why? So then he started to think, he questioned Andy. He thought, maybe he did do this. So there was a big mess. He then said, no, Andy raped and murdered her. Now, why? Anyway, there are questions in this case. It's not a cut and dry one, I'm afraid. Also, might I add, because I forgot to, that they both said that the rape had resulted in pregnancy, that Nicole was pregnant at the time of her death, and that is why the other one had killed her. Ooh-ah. Because of all of this hoo-ha, had the desired effect. It really did, because the police were like, right, we don't know what to think, so we will exhume her body. DNA samples were taken, and this is where it gets spicy. Hold on. Foreign DNA was found on her body, but not just one sample, but three. Now, stepdad, Ad, he offered his DNA so that he could be ruled out. How nice of you. However, one set of DNA was a match to either him or Andy. Now, I'm confused here slightly. Someone that knows more about this than me, please let me know. But apparently they couldn't differentiate because they're father and son. Is that the case? I thought, can you not get is it because it was a sample and not like a full, is that maybe why she thinks? Because if it was a full sample and they had, like they say, like it was a partial sample and things like that. So if they had a full sample of someone's DNA, they could do like 100%, that's that person. But because it was only a small amount, they could only get like in the ballpark. I don't know the language, but I'm guessing that's why. So they couldn't differentiate between it being his or Andy's? Oh, interesting. Because we're talking about semen here. Okay? Not, yeah. All right? So I want to know. You'd want to know. Either way, really. In that sample, they also found the DNA of her then boyfriend. I say then like that because they were on off. Throw that into the mix. And they also found a further DNA sample. Now, that sample would be identified in 2014. It belonged to 43-year-old Joss. I'm not going to say his surname because it was blanked out in lots of places, so I don't know if I'm allowed to say. We'll call him Joss. Now, his DNA was also found at the crime scene, right? So he was arrested. I reckon we're on to a winner with Joss because DNA, body, crime scene. He's also a 3 times convicted rapist. Is that how you say that? I just made that up. What's going on with me? Hello? Joss has 3 convictions for rape, and he, at the time, was also what's the word? It's gone out of my head. He was also a former psychiatric patient. So in the April, he would stand trial for Nicole's murder. But it was not cut and dry because the sample from Nicole's body, and this is actually where, you know, when I say tragedy, like a terrifying tragedy, because this poor girl, she's 15 years old, has a sample with 3 contributing men, 15 years old, and the only one of those people that I can imagine that she would have consented to is her then on and off again boyfriend. So what we're looking at here is actually a 15-year-old girl that towards the end of her life has been raped twice. That in my head, that's what we're looking at. And if that is not tragic, then I don't know what is. To play devil's advocate, her stepbrother, I mean, we possibly could be consensual, but they grew up together. They were brother and sister. Stranger things have happened, but I'm doubting that. Because of the crowded DNA sample, the defence they were on that, as you would be if you were the defence lawyer. Also, if there are 3 contributing men, how can you say that it was Joss that murdered her? How can you say that? DNA the crime scene. But okay. Joss said on the night of the murder he had an argument with his then girlfriend and stormed out and gone for a walk. So that was his alibi. No, that's not an alibi. You were out and about, mate. The defence argued that Joss and Nicole could have had consensual sex. The charges against Joss were then dropped from murder to rape and manslaughter. He then said he had no contact with Nicole on the day that she died, right? Not on the day that she died or disappeared, but he might have slept with her a few days before. Oh, possibility. Right. Honestly, the trial was messy. It went on for ages and it was messy. There was lots of just rubbish. I don't even want to go into it because it just annoyed me just reading about it. So it went on and on. The medical examiner did note that the wound was likely inflicted, the stab wound, by a Swiss Army knife. They also said that because there were multiple DNA contributors, that the sample might have been, what's that word, unreliable. So they had it all tested again. And that then showed that Joss's DNA was definitely part of the sample. It was 2.28 million times more likely than not likely that his DNA was present. So very, very likely. The prosecution quite rightly argued that Joss was not known to Nicole. There was no evidence that they knew each other, and that Nicole would not consent is the word there, to sexual intercourse with Joss, 43-year-old man. She was 15 at the time. She was with an on-off-again boyfriend working in a bakery, and she didn't know him. So, that was unlikely. They suggested a sentence of 14 years for Joss. He was found guilty of her rape and was given 5 years because he was legally insane at the time of the murder, and because of the DNA sample being, with different contributors, he was not sentenced or convicted of her murder. He was acquitted of the manslaughter charge. Something else just to be was that there was a mishandling of evidence, really, of all cases. Like, there's so much, they could have just really, her clothing was burnt after 2 months. Why? Why does that happen? Or did happen? Does it still happen? I'm not sure. It must do. I know mistakes are made, but geez, that's like literally that would have been crucial evidence. Just burnt. Now, in 2018, there was an appeal case because the prosecution, they wanted justice for Nicole. They didn't stop. They were after, the 14 years that they had said before. And his conviction was overturned and he was then given 12 years. So he'd already served some. So they got what they wanted. Still though, 14 years. That doesn't seem that long, does it? It may be just because it was such a messy trial and the evidence was a bit... And he has maintained his innocence. Says he did not do it. I said that I wanted to remember something, didn't I? Oh, it's gone. That's gone. I might remember now because I made some notes about my questions with this case. Okay? Because as I went on, I kept being like, what? Right? So I kept a little note. So my first question... help me out if you know, was about the DNA sample. Like I've already said, why couldn't they tell whether it's him or his son? Didn't get that. So let me know, because someone will be a clever cookie and they'll know that. Next one was, this was my next question. So why would Andy, the stepbrother, why would he confess and try and get her body exhumed? He was after that. He really was. That's what he wanted to happen. So that was his mission, was to get her body exhumed so that they could check for DNA. That he was being very proactive about it. If you have raped your sister and then murdered her, I doubt very much that you would do that. Really? No. I was going to say I can't believe that someone would be that stupid, but that I have been proven so wrong about people's stupidity in the past. So, I'm not going to say that, but I highly doubt it. So to me, out of the DNA profile, the 3 people, well, possibly the 3 DNA profiles, but there's 4 people in question, isn't there? The on and off again boyfriend, Joss, and Ad and his son Andy. I think Andy's off that list because I just think, you have got to be very stupid to get the body of the person you have murdered exhumed. So I don't think it was Andy. My little gut there just says that it was stepdad Ad. She moved out. She didn't like him. She wanted to live with her grandmother. All reasons, to be away from somebody that's harming you. In my gut, that sample belongs to stepdad Ad, and that's just poor kid. Then you've got the on and off again boyfriend. He doesn't come into it that much in this story. There's not much written about that, but it's almost written and things that I watched as if they were on and off together. Could he have been an angry person? I want to know that. Could he have snapped in anger? Were they on an off period? Did he snap? And did they meet before she went to work? And did he get really angry? And did something happen? Highly doubt that too. Highly doubt that. I think that they were on at that point and that's why there was a sample there. And let's be real. I think they have the right man. Joss's DNA was in the sample and at the crime scene, at the scene where her body was found. So I think you got your man. From all of their investigation, they couldn't find anything that tied Joss and Nicole, that they to prove that they knew each other. And he was 43, she was a 15-year-old girl, and he also was a convicted rapist. Also, just to let you know that he would always have 1 or 2 Swiss Army knives on his person. What I just find appalling here is that at the end of her life, that was how her life was taken. And from the evidence, it does strongly suggest that recently she had also been raped by her stepdad or her stepbrother. So tricky to say though, isn't it? And something else happened. Her stepbrother, sadly, he took his own life in 2021. And the thing is about having theories and stuff when evidence is shaky and inconclusive, these things can really, really, really change somebody's life. And mistakes are made, even within scientific evidence and DNA. So you have to be careful with who you're pointing the finger at and what you think. I know I have just sat here and said I think it was her stepdad. I couldn't find any information on whether that story in that chapter in Andy's life contributed to the decision that he made to end his own life. It might have done, it might not, I don't know. But just another tragedy in that family as well. Some might say, could he have not lived with himself when he knew what he had done? Or was he being blamed and the finger pointed at him for something that he really did not do? And that, it was his father? Again, this is all speculation. It's a very dangerous game, isn't it, speculation? Especially with things like this. But I do, in my heart, think that her killer has been caught. It's always a toughie, isn't it, when it's a case where you're like, oh, I don't know. What do you reckon? Let me know. Answers on the back of a postcard, please. I wonder. Always makes me think of movie scenes where the person's looking down or they're trying to give people signs about, oh, it was them. Oh, they did it. They killed me. Like that. Can you imagine if that really happened? Oh my gosh. No, don't, because I'm terrified now. Now I'm scared of snakes and ghosties. I hope it's not dark outside. I do feel a bit of a hot, sweaty mess. Sorry. It's a bit muggy. Like, full disclosure, literally, I can't get that snaky out of my mind. And my legs hurt from sitting with my feet up on a box because I'm too terrified. That's, the likelihood is, it's a baby. It will hear my big feet clomping along and be like, woo, no. I just don't like it. I'm going to have nightmares. I hate the snake dreams. I do sometimes have dreams about snakes as well. It's just, they haunt me. They do. I see them everywhere. And my imagination is just awful, right? Because I'm just sitting here and I'm just like, all I can think about is like snakes on a plane. When all the snakes come out of like everywhere. Worst nightmare. In I'm a Celebrity, when they put people in things with the... Can't watch it. Can't watch it. Can't Google it. I couldn't Google... Oh my God, it's making me itch. I couldn't Google about the things because then it gives you pictures on it comes up with like pictures. And I can't touch the screen. I'm looking everywhere now. I can't touch the screen but put my finger on the picture of one even. That's terrible. But I can't help it. And people are like, face your fears. Don't want to. Oh, don't want to. I'm quite happy to just, pretend they don't exist. Thank God I was not born in Australia. Do you get snakes in, like poisonous ones, big bad boy ones in the US? If I think of animals there, it's more, I don't know. What do I think of when I think of the alligators in America? They're scary. And sharks. And then in Australia, it's snakes and spiders and sharks and kangaroos. Who wants to be near a kangaroo? Have you seen them? They're not all cute. They're freaking I think they're scary. Bears, Canada. Think of bears in Canada. And what else? Don't know, but that's terrifying. They can kill you. They could literally take your head off, Paul says. Paul said like one swipe and they can take your head off. Can you imagine that? So no. And now I'm feeling better, because now I'm thinking I live in a country where I'm scared of an adder, and that's the scariest animal here, an adder. So I think I'm all right. I think I'm in the best place really for me, don't you? Now we've learned about animals and what countries they come from, I am going to be brave. I'm going to take myself down the garden. It's not a very big garden, and I can see. Hopefully it's not too dark. I'm going to be awful tonight. I'm itching. Also, why do I itch? A snake wouldn't. That's more like an insecty thing, isn't it? Like a spider. Oh, I'm not too bad with them, but like that, creepy crawlies that make your skin crawl. But I'm the same. If I think about snakes, it makes me itch. It's weird. Thank you so much for joining me today for another episode of Sin and Tonic. Hope you can join me next week for another true crime story and a glass, hopefully, of gin. I didn't have one tonight because I've actually got to get up in the morning quite early. Shame, isn't it? How boring. How boring. I'm going to make up for it next week. You mark my words. I'm going to have a fat cocktail. Someone said the other day, where's your cocktail at? It's like, I really must have another cocktail. I've got all the makings of one in the fridge. So I shall do that next week, and I'll let you know what it is. And it'll be glorious. I should have had one really, shouldn't I? For Dutch courage getting up the shed. Avoiding all those snakes. Oh, stop it. Right, okay. I'm going to love you and leave you. If you don't hear from me in the comments, it's because I've been eaten by an adder. Okay, I love you. And I will see you all next week. Look forward to chatting with you in the comments as always. Love you, bye.